So thank you for joining the AutoScheduler LinkedIn presentation where we're talking about warehouse orchestration in the era of big data. So let's just jump right into it. Okay, so today's topic, we're going to break it down into some components. We're first going to look at key warehousing metrics at a high level, at kind of the macro level. Then we'll jump into how big is big data in the warehouse. Then we'll move into what is warehouse optimization and what is warehouse orchestration. And is there really a difference? Oftentimes you hear people use warehouse optimization, warehouse orchestration interchangeably. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll move on to does orchestration in big data in a warehouse really matter? Why should I care if I'm a warehouse manager about all this? And then Q&A we can either save to the end, or if any of you have a burning question as we're talking about a particular topic, please type it in and we'll try to answer the questions on the fly as we go as well. All right, so let's move into it. First of all, let's look at key warehousing metrics. So CSCMP, every year they do a state of the industry logistics report. Typically it's published in the June timeframe, so another couple months it will be out. So this is statistics from the 2024 report, so almost a year old now, but directionally they're still pretty accurate. So if you look at business logistics costs in the United States, it's about $2.3 trillion, almost $2.4 trillion. That's a big, big number. A trillion's a hard number to even wrap your mind around. If you look at that as a percentage of US GDP, it's almost 9% of US GDP is spent on logistics-related costs of transportation, warehousing, transportation of ocean products, parcel, all those types of things. If you drill down into the warehouse component of that, so warehousing is about 30% of US logistics costs. So in other words, it's about $700 billion a year gets spent in the United States on warehousing. Still a big number. $1 billion is a hard number to wrap your mind around. If you break it down even from there and say, well, how much of the cost is storage and handling related costs? So your people, your real estate, that kind of thing, versus your inventory carrying costs, it's about 57% or about $400 billion a year is spent on storage and handling. And about 43% or about $300 billion a year is in the inventory carrying costs. So what's interesting about that is, in my own mind, before I looked at this, I would have thought inventory carrying costs, because you're talking about the cost of the product, would actually be more than the real estate and the labor associated with warehousing. But it's actually not. It's it's by about $100 billion, give or take. It's actually labor and real estate is more expensive than inventory carrying costs. If you look at the right-hand side of the screen, some of the top 10 warehouse inefficiency areas, and kind of on a relative impact score, 1 to 10, 10 being the greatest impact, 1 being the lowest impact, and say, what are some of the biggest areas of inefficiency in warehouses? Labor productivity and idle time is a big component. So how do you make sure that, oftentimes what you see in warehouses is the work is somewhat lumpy, right? It's not just a nice flat line of work each day that you can plan on. And so oftentimes you have idle time, you have lumpiness, you can't just, send people home type of thing very easily. And so that's the biggest area. Inefficient picking has to do with, where is the picking in relationship to, the optimal picking slot based on, the speed of the turn. It also has to do with how are you picking. So if you have, a pallet plus sum, how does that plus sum get picked, and what's the most efficient way to pick that? Staging and dock congestion is a big area, especially in a lot of these large warehouses. Oftentimes you see pinch points in a building for both staging as well as loading and unloading of trailers. And if you look at it on a heat map, oftentimes it's very interesting to look at. Inventory accuracy is one that kind of catches a lot of people by surprise, because they'll say, well, my inventory is like 95% accurate all the time. Where I think this number comes is oftentimes in drop trailers. And so inventory sitting in trailers in the yard, oftentimes organizations lose visibility into that inventory. Use of technology is another big area. Lack of real-time visibility. So oftentimes you're batching stuff coming through and you don't really have real-time visibility as to what's going on inside the building. Poor slotting strategies. Again, that's really related to, how high of a turn item is it in relationship to where does that product sit in a warehouse. Yard management, poor yard management's another big area. And then underutilized equipment and assets. That kind of gets tied to that first one there of labor productivity. So if you have to essentially buy assets for the building, but you have first shift that's typically, or second shift, maybe higher head count, third shift, fourth shift are lower head count. So sometimes you'll have a lot of equipment that's not being fully utilized as well. And then lastly is kind of how do you manage the exceptions associated with a particular a site. And exceptions happen every day, right? And so that whole process of managing. So those are some of the challenges that warehouses have that really drive inefficiency, drive how you can optimize or how you can orchestrate inside those buildings. All right. So let's shift gears here for a little bit and talk about how big is big data in a warehouse. Okay, so we got this nice picture of about 1 million square foot building. So we're going to use 1 million square foot building as the example today. And in this 1 million square foot building, you have about 100 people working across 4 shifts. You have 3 different pick types. You have full pallet picks, you have layer picks, and you have case picks. You have about 500 stock keeping units inside the building. You have 100 dock doors on both sides of the building. You have 40 lift trucks, and some lift trucks are, when I say lift trucks, it's really some combination of lift trucks, pallet jacks, high reaches, those types of things. You have 700 drop trailer locations, and you have 100,000 pallet positions in the building. So that's kind of the example that we're going to use for big data. So now let's say you want to assign just one task at one point in time to an individual worker. So if you think about that problem, so who's going to do the work out of the 100 people that you have available? What is the work that's going to be doing? Are they going to be doing in terms of the pick type, the stock keeping unit that they're picking? How are they getting that work done with what type of equipment? Where is the work getting done? Is it getting done out in the dock? Is it a pick somewhere in the warehouse? Is it a move of a trailer to a door? So what is the work that they're doing? And then specifically, when are they doing that work in the time block available for that site? So for that one simple task to try to figure out all the different options that you have available, there's over 235 trillion, 235 trillion potential combinations of how that work could get done for just that one task. So now you think about, 3 or 4 shifts, you think about hundreds of shipments going in and out of a building every day, hundreds of workers showing up for work each day. All those moves, all those combinations, it literally becomes this huge astronomical number very, very quickly in terms of how this work can get planned. And, a lot of times when you look at how individual sites are managing this work and you go into the shipping receiving office, they're using spreadsheets, they're pulling data from different systems, and they're trying to figure it out with tribal knowledge as best they can. And if you think about it mathematically, it's a very, very complex problem that these sites are trying to figure out how to best orchestrate this work on a day-to-day basis. So as I said, it's a very, very big number. And sometimes you almost have to, again, take it down to a more micro number to kind of understand, the complexity of it all. So let's use the game of chess. So if we were playing chess today, each player gets to control 16 pieces on a board. And there's 64 squares where you can move your pieces. So by the time you're 3 moves into the chess game, so 6 plays in all between the two opponents, 1 play per opponent, there are over 119 million ways that those first 3 moves could get played out in a chess game. So when we were talking on the previous slide of, trillions, you can quickly see how even a relatively simple solve in the first 3 moves of a chess game is yielding potentially 119 million combinations of the way work can get done, so to speak, or the game can get played. And you compare that to the warehouse, it's a very, very big data problem that you're trying to solve for when you're doing warehouse orchestration. All right, so let's move into this next topic of conversation about warehousing optimization versus warehouse orchestration. And is there really a difference? And as I said earlier, oftentimes you see people use these terminologies somewhat interchangeably. So let's kind of dig down into this a little bit more. Okay, so let's first look at warehouse optimization. So the definition of warehouse optimization is the process of improving individual components of a warehouse operation, for example, inventory, labor, space, or equipment, to achieve better performance, and it's typically in a static or narrowly focused way. So some examples are you're slotting your fast-moving items closer to the pick zone to reduce travel time. So that's a picking optimization problem you're trying to solve for. Or reducing excess inventory to free up space. So that's more of a space/inventory optimization problem you're solving for. Or balancing workforce across zones based on average order volume. So it's more of a labor optimization play. Or minimizing travel distance for pickers. And that's another labor optimization example. So when you're talking about warehouse optimization, you're really oftentimes talking about kind of siloed improvements to the site. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, right? You're improving the performance of the site, but you're specifically picking out kind of areas of the building or the work that's being done, kind of your soft spots, if you will, and trying to optimize for those. So that's really what warehouse optimization is all about. If you look at warehouse orchestration, on the other hand, warehouse orchestration, if you look at the definition, it's the real-time AI-driven coordination of all warehouse functions, inbound, outbound, inventory, labor, equipment, etc., to respond dynamically to real-world events and maximize throughput across the system. So examples of that is when a truck is delayed, and trucks never are late, right? They always show up at the exact time they're going to promise you to show up. That's not a true statement. We all know that. But when trucks are delayed, the system automatically reshuffles picking priorities and labor assignments. So that's an example of what happens when trucks are late. Or as orders change, dock schedules and trailer sequencing are adjusted on the fly. Or labor is reallocated in real time as shift conditions change. So you might have one group of people that are doing a certain set of tasks, they get their task done quicker, and the other team is falling behind, and so you can reassign people from work area A to work area B to get caught up. So it's really all about kind of cross-functional and dynamically looking at kind of all the things that are happening in that building and then orchestrating kind of end to end how work should get done. So I think by now we've probably answered the question. Is there a difference? Absolutely yes. Optimization from a scope perspective is really focusing on specific subtasks, whether it's inventory, labor, layout, whereas orchestration is more holistic. Timing on optimization is oftentimes it's a batch type of process. Orchestration is more real-time and continuous. From an approach perspective, optimization is really oftentimes rules-based and analytics, whereas orchestration is more AI, machine learning, driven and responsive. And the objective of optimization is really to improve efficiency of the parts, whereas orchestration is trying to maximize the throughput of the whole. And from a flexibility perspective, optimization has somewhat limited adaptability, whereas orchestration is much more highly dynamic and adaptive based on kind of what's going on inside the building and responding to the kind of the real-time what happens and how do you kind of respond to what has happened. So, if you think about it from a musical perspective, optimization is like fine-tuning the instruments in the orchestra, whereas orchestration is really conducting the whole concert in real time and modifying as you need to get the results that you want to achieve. So that's really the difference between warehouse optimization and orchestration. Okay, let's move into, does orchestrating big data in a warehouse really matter? So why should I care about all of this, right? So the answer to that, again, is yes. Your warehouse isn't just moving pallets. You're managing, trillions of possibilities at any given time, at any given moment. And that is really hard to do with spreadsheets and tribal knowledge. And, without orchestration, the warehouse is more likely to respond more slowly to problems, which can result in late trucks, labor shortages, picking errors, that type of thing. And if you're trying to manage big data without orchestration, it's really managed chaos that you're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. If you're using warehouse orchestration to really manage big data, it's really helping you get the real-time intelligence and being able to make the right decisions at the right time in order to get the results that you want. And end of the day, what matters, it's reducing your costs, improving service level. That's what it's all about in every warehouse environment. It's some combination of how do I reduce costs and how do I improve service level. And that can change from site to site or even during different times of the year. But warehouse orchestration really helps solve for that day in and day out based on what's going on inside the building. So next question, why should I care, right? I run a warehouse today. I have a WMS system. I've got people that are coming in every day and trying to manage all of this. And so, why should I be thinking about anything beyond how it works today? So I think some of the things you should be thinking about is from a throughput perspective. Without orchestration, you're more likely to have bottlenecks in the operation. You're more likely to have missed shipments. With orchestration, you're continually reprioritizing to make sure that the product is flowing through the building as efficiently as possible. If you look at it from a labor perspective, without orchestration, you're more likely to have idle workers. You're more likely to have wrong tasks being done at the wrong time. With orchestration, you're more likely to have the right person doing the right task at the right moment in time. From a cost control perspective, without orchestration, you're more likely to have higher overtime numbers. You're more likely to have inefficiency around the dock and wasted moves. With orchestration, you're more likely to have kind of optimized usage of your resources and more likely to reduce overtime over over a period of time. From a service levels perspective, without orchestration, you're more likely to have missed deliveries. You're more likely to incur carrier penalties or detention. With orchestration, you're more likely to have better OTIS scores, on time in full, meaning I'm getting the right product to the right customers at the right time, and I'm maximizing my fill rates by sequencing my inbounds and outbounds in such a way to maximize that. From a resilience perspective, without orchestration, oftentimes you go in and every day your hair's on fire and you're basically reacting, you're in firefighting mode every day. Whereas with orchestration, you're really doing more proactive planning, you're reducing the firefighting, and you're doing more proactive problem solving. From a customer satisfaction, at the end of the day, that's what oftentimes it's all about is, are we hitting our customer satisfaction? Without orchestration, you're more likely to have failures to your customer, delays to your customer, shortages to your customers. Whereas with orchestration, you're more likely to improve all those metrics. So I think from our perspective, the way we think about it, it's a pretty compelling case to really think about seriously, how do I better orchestrate the work that gets done at these large distribution centers? So the bottom line is, if you have big data but no orchestration, you're getting buried under the complexity and leaving profits on the table. And oftentimes it's a hidden cost that nobody really sees, right? You have an anticipated budget of real estate cost me X, labor cost me Y, equipment cost me Z. And as long as I'm within that budget tolerance, nobody's asking me questions. But if you think about the money you're leaving on the table, the loss of profits that you're incurring because you're not as efficient as you could be, that's a big number, right? Oftentimes in these big buildings, you're talking about a payroll of $5 to $10 million. So anything that you can do from an efficiency perspective is big. So if you're orchestrating with big data, you're unlocking big savings, you're maximizing the throughput through the building and delighting your customers in real time. So orchestration is the difference between playing whack-a-mole and conducting a symphony. And I think we've all been in warehouses where you could see the game of whack-a-mole gets played every day, right? And some people are very, very good at playing whack-a-mole. But is that the game you really want to be playing every day? Or do you want to be more proactive in terms of how you're getting this work done and try to avoid playing whack-a-mole as much as possible? All right. So that is what we had for you today as it relates to kind of warehouse orchestration and big data. As Gaetano mentioned at the beginning of the session, if you're interested in learning more about, playing the game of warehousing, we have a game on our website. You can scan this QR code. It will take you to the game, and you can see how well do you play the game of warehousing. And it's going to be a very relatively simple game, and it's fun to play. And just see how well your score is and see if you can beat the top score. And I think you'll quickly get a better understanding of what is the complexity associated with kind of doing this orchestration that we've been talking about.
Jeff, while that's up there, I just want to make a comment that every
Yes.
time you heard a dog bark, Jeff was getting a delivery. So not only is he he's our expert, he's also a consumer. So just so everybody at home knows that.
That's
Sorry,
right.
go on.
Yeah. No, my dogs, they love to bark at the squirrels. They love to bark at the Amazon or the UPS or FedEx delivery people. So yeah. So you heard them in the background. All right. And then we've had some other LinkedIn events as well. So if you'd like to look at past recordings, there's a lot of great content out there. And we'd love to have you look at that as well. So again, really appreciate your time today. Thank you for this. And as soon as we're done here, we'll make this recording available to anybody who wants to watch it. And certainly appreciate your time today and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. thanks again for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Jeff.